my brother would not have died. That was the cry of Mary's heart. She is expressing her innermost desires to God. And I submit to you that we can, in good conscience, ask God for the longings of our heart. You can ask God what you want. No matter what the situation is, Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. In other words, what I want my brother. That's what I want. I want my family to be restored whole. I want my life put back together again. I want my relationships healed. I want my job fixed. Or I want a job, whatever the case may be. Lord, I want you to put things in right. You can ask God. But here's the thing. Jesus, if you had showed up and you had behaved like you should have, since you're God, my life would be real different. Y'all stay with me for a moment here. If you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. If you had been here, situations would be different. The outcome wouldn't have been death for my brother. If you had been here. Did you ever reach a place in your life where you stop and you look at your life and you say, you know, if God had showed up, maybe things would have looked different. I'm the only one. Because here's the thing. We as believers, as I've pointed out, could have the same attitude that Martha had. Lord, if you had been here. Let me put it in context for you. We as a church are going through a time of change and transition. And some people could be thinking, Lord, if you had showed up, our situation might look different. Maybe we wouldn't have had to have moved. Maybe we would have been in the same facility. Maybe if you had showed up. Maybe if you had showed up. Maybe if you had showed up, my life would be different. Or we sit back after going through some relationship that didn't quite work out the way we thought it was going to work out. And so it caused our lives to take a different direction. And then we say, well, Lord, if you had a move back then my situation now would be a little different. In other words, we can get caught in the past, thinking if God had done X, Y, and Z, then our lives would be different now. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Now, here's the thing, though. People inside and outside of the church all experience loss. Have you noticed that? We experience as believers the same things that people outside of the church experience. They experience loss, grief, hurt, discouragement, pain, the same things we encounter as Christians. We're not exempt from those things in life. No more than Martha and Mary were. We have to deal with real life. Has anybody realized that though you're a Christian, you got to deal with real life? You know, the real life, the real world. The difference is they don't have the problem that we have. Now, somebody might be asking, well, what's the problem that we have? For Christians, this is our problem. We have the God problem. Now, somebody's thinking, God's not a problem. No, God's not a problem. We have the God problem. Because we have to wrestle with this idea of where was God in the midst of all of this. If you're outside of the kingdom, you don't really deal with that question. But if you're inside the kingdom, you've got to deal with that question. Where was God in the midst of all of this? And that becomes a problem for believers if we don't learn how to handle it. Where was God in the midst of this? Why didn't God show up? You ever ask yourself that question? I know I'm the only one. Nobody, nobody has ever questioned why doesn't God come through? See, here's the thing. We all deal with it. Some of us just aren't honest enough to admit that we deal with it. If you've ever been hoping and believing for something that didn't happen, and you're a believer, and you say, I never asked why, or why didn't God come through? Why didn't God show up? I was believing for something, and it didn't happen, but I thought that God was all powerful. And, why didn't God show up? It's okay to ask those questions. It's better to ask those questions than to act like you don't and to become a root of bitterness in your life. Because once it becomes a root of bitterness, then you start playing church with your relationship with God. You can't be honest with God, and you can't be honest with one another. And faking it doesn't work. Some people say, I'll fake it till I make it. Why doesn't God come through? Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. In other words, what she wants a miracle. But even now I know, whatever you ask God for, he'll do it. God, give me a miracle. God, give me a breakthrough. God, turn it around. Well, let me stop for a moment. Let me stop for a moment and back up. This is for people who actually believe God is active in the world. Because there are Christians who really don't believe God is active in the world. He kind of created stuff and then he kind of backed up and everything's just kind of like running. Lord, if you had been here, but even now I know we are free to tell God what we long for in our heart. Jesus never silenced Mary and Martha, never criticized them for a lack of faith. So what Mary and Martha wanted, they got, which was they got Lazarus back from the dead. How many of y'all know Jesus did bring Lazarus back? But there's a problem in that miracle of Lazarus coming back from the dead. And generally, we don't talk about it. Here's the problem with Lazarus coming back from the dead. He died again. Did you ever think about that? Did you ever think what happened to Lazarus after he was resurrected from the dead? Because the scriptures never say what happened to him. After we know he got resurrected, we never find out, well, what happened after he got resurrected from the dead. He died again. He got a miracle, but it was a short-lived miracle. Some of y'all looking like, I don't believe he died again. Do you read anything about him in any of the Gospels after he got raised from the dead? Do you read about him in the book of Acts? Do you hear any other biblical writers talking about Lazarus' ministry in the text? I'm sure if this is a man that got raised from the dead, I'm sure he would have had some preeminence in the church. Oh, come on, y'all. This man got raised from the dead. We want to know what he got to say. He never pops up again. They got a miracle, But it was a short-lived miracle. It was a short-term fix for a long-term problem. That's what miracles are. They're short-term fixes for long-term problems. You ever get a miracle before? Anybody ever have a miracle of healing? Every day is a miracle. I'm talking specific miracles here, though. Every day is a miracle. I've had God really give me a miracle of healing in my back, only to need another miracle in my leg a couple years down the road. They're short-term fixes to long-term problems. We're not designed to live off of miracles.
That's right. That's right.
We're not designed to live off of miracles. In fact, miracles really don't convince people that God is real. Ask the Israelites. They had a whole bunch of miracles. In fact, they had 10 miraculous miracles that got them out of Egypt. Did that stop them from rebelling in the wilderness? No. Think about the people that walked with Jesus and saw his miracles. In fact, the miracle they did with Lazarus sealed his death warrant. They said, he out here raising folk from the dead. We got to kill him. That's the human heart. Miracles do not convince the human heart that God is real. Short-term miracle. In fact, and I know this from experience, from walking in these circles for a minute, the very worst thing that could happen to a person is to learn how to live from one miracle to the next. Miracle after miracle after miracle. Well, what are you waiting on? I'm waiting on my next miracle. I need my next breakthrough. I need for God to show up again the way he did with Lazarus. I need him to do something. I need him to come through for me. Where's faith in all of this, though? Where's living by faith in all of this? Where is that track where we say, I know where God is leading, and despite what I'm seeing or experiencing in the natural, I'm going to follow through? Where's that at? Because this America, you know, we got Christianity American style right now. We want God to perform on cue. If you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. If you had showed up, things would be different. I want God to perform on cue, and I want God to do what I think he should do in this situation. Personalize it. Internalize it, make it your own, and deal with it. This is where Christianity and our walk with Jesus and our relationship with God becomes real. It's where we stop playing Christian and being Christian. We start doing and honoring what Scripture tells us to do, even when things don't seem to be going the way we thought they were going to go, because we don't think God has showed up. See, we might be at that place with Mary where Jesus knows all about it, but he ain't moving yet. He said, I ain't ready to move. I'm going to stay where I'm at, because I'm not interested in just giving them a short-term fix for their problem. I need for them to understand exactly who I am so they can live into the reality of what I've called them to become. Y'all ain't listening. Y'all ain't listening. Y'all ain't listening. Y'all ain't listening. That's where stuff gets real. I'm closing. And my mark, I'm closing. We want God on our terms.